I am Ain Gordon, and I'm a theater artist, writer, director, actor, and I'm here in Marlboro / Guilford / the area, researching a new play called Not What Happened, which is kind of taking a look at both historical reenactment and the politics of historical reenactment, and rural American history and how you can reenact a history that leaves almost no trace. What do you do with a history that isn't findable? Much of my work is about history and about how history is a kind of ruthless editing machine that leaves out the sidebars and tangents and wants to tell a certain story no matter what. And I'm pretty interested in all the things that don't get told and that are not deemed important enough to be historicized, and how that becomes a story, and the distance between what actually happened and the story we can tell about it. So part of the sort of collaborative research of this project is with Forrest Holtzapfel, who is the town lister in Marlboro and a historian, I would say, I don't know how he would define it, but of vernacular architecture and also of sort of photography practices in rural America, particularly in the sort of late 19th, early 20th century. And Forrest and I take walks. That's what we do. And today we are walking around Marlboro and actually looking at where the buildings are, where the buildings aren't, and where the buildings were, because several of them are not on their original location. And from there, kind of trying to figure out the relationship of these and original intent of some of these buildings, which is now changed because of where they've been moved to or how they've been repurposed after they've been moved. And then we're going to probably go into Newfane. There's a historic museum there that we want to look at, and some buildings there. I also want to look at the road from here to Newfane, because one of the things that I'm also interested in finding out with Forrest is kind of the original traffic patterns, because, you know, it takes 10 minutes to get to Guilford or 20 minutes to get to Guilford, but once upon a time it took 4 hours to get to Guilford. And I'm pretty interested in what that experience is and trying to experience the notion of time in 1800, how long it took to do everything is really interesting to me, because I think it's hard to actually understand the history if we keep looking at it through the lens of how easy it is to access now. I've been looking with Forrest today and other days at kind of foundations and stone walls and cellar holes and the whole sort of notion of reforesting, of a landscape that reclaims man-made history, and therefore that what's left to be historicized is minimal. So who wants to tell the story of a cellar hole? Forrest does, I do, but a lot of people don't. So the notion of trying to imagine what is the full life that created that tiny remnant now in a piece of ground that is reforested. I am going to tell a fictional story, I think. It looks like it's a fictional story, but using, I'm particularly interested in, you know, there's a whole lot of vocabulary around sort of rural life and about, the story is set in about 1804. There's a whole lot of vocabulary that we don't use anymore to do with equipment and activity and food, and so I'm interested in, that's the non-fictional aspect I'm sort of researching, is that vocabulary, that life, that view, how long everything took, how silent everything was, how solitary everything was, and how precious the few objects that there were, and how much those objects disappeared in history depends on artifacts. So that history disappeared. Okay, one of the things I like as an artist is to be in situations not of my own making, that I can do it all from my desk in my life, but then I'm only going to write things from my experience. And something that sort of keeps me going is to be immersed in something I don't know. And when I started to think about writing this piece, I started to think more and more about the notion of artifacts, of evidence, and of rural America, which is not something I've ever written about before, and how little I really knew about it. And what I like is to kind of physically immerse myself into a situation so that I can actually write it from the inside as opposed to narrate it from the outside. And so being here, I mean, it's all research. Anything is research. Waking up in the morning in the silence is research. Looking out the window and seeing the tree and noticing the bird is flying that way into the tree this morning as opposed to the other way yesterday morning, that's all research. That's what the character I'm trying to imagine would be seeing. The play itself is two characters. One is this historical reenactor who is leading is the tour guide, and the audience is the tourists, and is taking the audience through the tour of this 19th century farm. And the other character is the actual historic woman that she is reenacting in her own day in the summer kitchen baking bread. And nothing happens. Then that's part of the key is I'm very interested in really trying to write, I mean, of course something has to happen, it's theater, but I'm interested in trying to write the truth of a woman alone in a summer kitchen, talking to herself because there isn't anything else to do, and she bakes bread every Thursday for 30 years, talking to herself and baking bread and noticing the wind, the birds, and rambling in the way you would ramble on your own. I'm trying to write it I want her not to talk like an actor talks so the audience knows what the story is. I'm trying to really write it so that she talks like a person by herself. And then there is the guide trying to historicize that life, which has left no trace for her to historicize.
Is the guide going to be, is the woman baking bread going to realize the guide is there? You know, or is it like a...
I haven't decided. They do not at this moment meet, but it's open. I'm not sure about it. You know, it would be a natural arrival place, and that just the natural, the obviousness of that as an arrival is making me kind of shy away from it and wondering if there's a sort of sideways way I can do it. But I haven't decided. And the guide, it's the woman actually in the play, the historic woman dies at 48. And the guide is 48, and her final monologue is about the fact that she's now going to be too old to play this character anymore, that she's played for 20 years. This has been her life, is to be this other life. And now she's going to have to leave, and they're going to have to get a new one. And so it just goes on.